Today we are going to be doing yet another modification on what I have dubbed the Franken radio. And this is an old Panasonic model RE-6278. I believe it's from the 70s. I found this thing in the trash a while ago, and I used this mainly at work. And it's had a few modifications to it. I've added an input to it so I can plug my iPod into it. And not only that, is where I used to work, some genius had a standard outlet wired to 240 volt, and I happened to plug this into it and blew out the transformer, so I had to replace the transformer with one from another radio that I found in the trash. But anyway, you can see I have just a standard input on here, and this is from just from a pair of headphones. But as you can see, that it's starting to, the wires are broken in here, so it doesn't work very well. But we can see here. I took my troubles down tonight, and whenever the iPod's connected, it automatically cuts out the radio. And as you can see, the radio still functions as well. Alright, so we'll shut that off. Now, disconnect power. Now we'll open it up and I'll show you what's inside it. And I'm gonna have to glue the faceplate back on. It doesn't stay on very well. Alright, so here we go, the insides of the radio. As you can see, this is the original transformer right here, and that's fried. This transformer here was from just a cheapy little portable Chinese radio that I found in the trash that didn't work very well. The transformer was good, and it was a double tap transformer, and it fits in here and it works. I don't know if it's the same voltage output. I believe it's probably less than the original one, because if you crank the volume up on here, it distorts a lot. But it works for what I need it to do. And here's our input wire. It goes onto the volume control. I'm not sure if you can see that down there. Let me zoom in. And you can see down in this wire right here goes down onto the volume control. And we're just going to get that off of there because we don't need this anymore since we're going to be replacing this. And if you've seen my last video where I took the iPod cable off of that little transmitter right here, oops, zoom out, where we have our little iPod connector, docking connector, and we're going to wire this into the radio. Also, because my wonderful little iPod, which is held together with a hair tie, it's a 30 gig, this thing's ancient, the battery only lasts about 2 to 3 hours on it, so we're going to wire this up so it'll get power from the radio, and that way we don't have to worry about it going dead halfway through my day. Alright, so first step, let's pull one of these pieces of tape back here, and we'll measure what kind of output we're getting from this transformer. All right, we're getting about 6¼ volts, which is great for the iPod, because as it says here on the back of this iPod, somewhere, rated 5 to 30 volts, 1 amp. So that'll work great with that. But it won't, because this is outputting AC, whereas the iPod requires DC, which is where this little box will come in handy. This is a bridge rectifier, much heavier duty than what we require, but I've got a handful of these laying around, so I figured might as well use it. So our first thing we're going to do is see where we can find a place to mount this. Now, normally this would be mounted to like a heat sink for a rectifier of this size. It's got a metal housing. But we're not going to be pulling nearly the amount of current through it that it's going to require a heat sink. So we'll just screw it right to the back of the radio, like I did with the transformer. So let's take a look in here and see where we can mount this where it will clear and not hit any other components. And it looks like right down here might be good. Right like that. So I've got a screw here. Which is a little bit longer than what I need. But again, working with what we've got. And put a nut on there to secure it. Gonna need the pliers because this is a lock nut. Alright, that should be good. And let's make sure that's not going to interfere with anything. Okay, it looks like we're clear. Alright, so now what we're going to have to do is disconnect our wires from our transformer and wire them into the rectifier. We're only going to use one side, obviously, because we're not going to need the additional the additional leg of the transformer is still going to be powering the radio, but we're just going to need one side of it. So now will this reach? Actually, yes, that will reach. I won't need to extend that connector. But I will need to extend this white one here. So I've got a piece of wire over there. Actually, let's turn it this way so we can see what I'm doing. And we're just going to unsolder this lead from the volume connector, which is the switch of the radio. Okay, simple enough. And now we'll be able to lay out our back here where we have room. Now, as you can see here on the rectifier, we have minus and plus, which are our two DC connectors. Then we have the input AC connectors down here. Which, of course, it doesn't matter which side we connect those to because it's AC. So let's just go ahead and strip a little bit more wire off, or a little bit more insulation off of here. so we can make a good connection on the terminal. And I know I don't have my proper wire strippers, but this is very small gauge wire, so it'll be fine. All right. Let's just wrap the wire around there. And now we're also going to need to attach another wire onto there, because we still need to put power to the radio itself. So let's strip this other little wire I've got. Now normally you should stick with using the same color wire, but I'm not really concerned about that because this is not factory anyway. And it's quite simple to see what the wire is doing. It's going from the transformer to the switch. So let's get these twisted together. Put that in there. And we will solder that onto our rectifier here. That should be good. We'll let that cool off for a little bit. And we've got a secure connection, which is good. And we're just going to bend this strip over so we won't risk contacting anything. A little difficult to do with my left hand here, but all right. And we'll just make sure we have clearance and we're not touching anything, and we're good. All right. Now this wire here will now go onto our switch on our volume control. First, we're going to need to tin the lead, though, as this is just bare wire, there's no solder on it. And whenever you're soldering, you always want to heat the item that you're soldering with the iron. You don't want to just put the gun on there and press the solder onto the gun or your iron, because there's a good chance that will end up creating a cold solder joint. You actually want to heat your item that you're soldering and then touch the solder to the item you're soldering to ensure a good connection. Alright, so now let's attach this wire. Actually, before we connect that, because this is going to be a little bit shorter, we'll go ahead and wire in our iPod connector cable. Now, as we remember from the other video, we had orange and green were our left and right input, white was the ground, red was positive, black was negative, and yellow was not used. So I'm not sure what yellow is for, but if it wasn't being used in there, it's not going to be used in here either. So let's just trim that off. Alright, and we got to pick a place where we're going to put this cable through. We'll just feed all the wires in through like that. And that should be good. I should have grabbed a couple wire ties, but we can do that later. And a soldering pencil or a standard soldering iron would come in a lot more handy doing something like this, but I don't have my soldering iron handy because this is a little bit, using a soldering gun like this is a little bit difficult to get into a tight spot. Alright, so now that we have our audio connections connected, we're going to go ahead and connect this one power lead. And then we will test it out. All right. So now let's see if this will work. Now again, we don't have our iPod power connected yet, but I just want to make sure that our audio connection works. Okay, we heard the tuning circuit cut out. You know that gypsy with the gold cap too. She's got a man on selling little bottles of love. And it worked. And it actually works better, to tell you the truth. I told her that I was a flop with chicks. I've been this way since 1950. Alright. There we go. That part's a success. And it actually works better because the equalizer and the amplifier in the iPod was actually overloading the amplifier in the radio a tiny bit. So connecting to the direct output of the dock connector does work a lot better. Alright, so now let's disconnect our power again. And now we're going to go ahead with wiring up our power connections. Alright, so actually I should have wired this onto that side. Get this out of the way so we don't accidentally melt it. And now we'll just solder this into place. Let that cool off a little. Oh, and we soldered the two wires together, but we didn't solder it to the terminal. Which again, like I said, you want to heat the item that you're soldering, not the solder, because something like that could happen. Alright, we look good there. Okay, get that wire out of the way. Now we're going to simply solder this wire, which doesn't quite reach. But when it's installed it will, so we're going to have to lift this up a little bit just to get that out of the way. Or not get it out of the way, but so that it'll reach. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and connect our power leads for our iPod. Alright, now to solder this last connection on here. So now let's see if our radio still works, and then we'll test our voltage on the output of the rectifier. Okay, radio still works. So now let's test our voltage output here. And switch to DC and see what kind of voltage we're getting out of here. Oops. .14 volts. 0.17 volts. Wonder if I connected this wrong. Oh, yes I did. Ha. Whoops. That's when it helps to double check what we're working with here. As you can see here on this rectifier, that's not plus and minus on here. That's plus, and it's a little wavy line, which is AC. So this side here is AC connection, and this side here would be, this would be positive, and this side should be negative. So we've got to switch our these two terminals around. Hopefully we didn't damage the rectifier, but if we did, I've got another one. So let's unsolder.